Welcome to my channel. This is Defender, and today we're going to be deep diving into DNS and DHCP, mostly DHCP. Be able to understand how DHCP is configured on a router and assign network configurations to different LANs and even interfaces of a network device. In this case, being R3 on G00, right? So without further ado, let's start. So we're gonna start with OSPF and interfaces. It says that everything has pre-configured IPs except R2, R3, and both VLANs, right? So for the VLANs, we're not gonna statically assign IP addresses. We're gonna dynamically assign them through DHCP. And then we're gonna configure OSPF only for the LANs, so that the network path are learned through other routers. And then we're going to send a static route to the internet and have static routes to the LAN networks and not any with the wildcard of /32, because if you do that, then you're going to widen the attack surface of the attacker, right? And we don't want to do that, so we want to minimize the attack surface for the attacker, and we'll do that by just specifying the networks that we want the packets to be to its destination, right? So, and then we're going to configure a default routes to the internet, like I said previously, and we're going to assign that router as the ASBR, since we're going to distribute that static route to other routers via OSPF. Now, it's just a very quick OSPF configuration. So very much more, I would say, detailed lab that I did on OSPF. You should check it out if you guys haven't. For DHCP, now this is the heart of the lab. We're going to configure network configurations for 3 DHCP pools, right? Pool 1 would be for LAN A 10.0.1.0/24 being our network, and then we're going to reserve .1 and all the way up to .10, right? We're going to reserve those IP addresses for any other network device or critical services, servers, right? For example, we want to install an Apache server, an Apache web server. It could be 10.0.1.4, and that's what we're going to reserve that range for 1 to .10. And we're going to do the same thing for LAN A. We're going to reserve that 1 for .10, all the way to .10, right? And for pool 3, we're going to reserve 253, which is the interface which is going to be our DHCP server's interface, which is on interface G01, right? And the reason for that being because that pool is 192.168.2.252 with a /30 network, which has 4 total IP addresses. Remember, you gotta reserve 1 for network and broadcast, leaving us with 2 usable IP addresses. The last one being .254. Instead of statically assigning the IP address, I'm going to show you guys how to do that via DHCP. Now, the DNS for all of these devices are going to be Ubuntu, which is 192.168.3.2 with a domain of build-attack-defend.net. And then our default gateway is going to be R2 for LAN B, and then R3 for LAN A. Okay, and then after doing that, we're going to configure R3 G00 as a DHCP client. Again, that's how you dynamically assign an IP address via DHCP. And then we're going to configure R3 as a DHCP relay agent, basically acting as a middleman for LAN A, where LAN A is able to get those network configurations from the DHCP server through the DHCP relay agent. If there was no DHCP relay agent, LAN A won't be able to get those configurations needed that they would need for their IP address, default gateway, and so on and so forth. And then on our end host, we're going to make a request for an IP address from their DHCP server. And then DNS, we're going to configure all internal and hosts to use Ubuntu as your DNS server, which we already going to do that through DHCP. Configure all internal routers to use Ubuntu as its DNS server. And then essentially ping all PCs by name, right? So PC4, PC5, ping PC6, and then also ping google.com. So let's go straight to the lab. Let's start with R2. We see that we have some interfaces down. Enable config T. Interface G00, IP address. Let's see if we have any IP address configured. Do show IP interface brief. So we do, but the protocol is down. Let's see why. Go to R1. Enable config T. Do show IP interface brief. We see that we don't have an assigned address for that interface, so we'll do interface G02. IP address 192.168.2.249, 255.255.255.252. No shutdown. Okay, so we're good. Now we're going to assign IP addresses for G01 to G02. Interface G01. Again, we're only do part one of the lab, OSPF and interfaces. We're going to do 192.168.2.253, 255.255.255.252. No shutdown. Interface G02. IP address 10.0.1.254, 255.255.255.0. No shutdown. We're going to do OSPF all at once. Router OSPF1 network 192.168.2.252. Wildcard /3. Sorry, /30 is 3. We're going to do area 10. For this scenario, 10.0.1.0, wildcard, all zeros, but the last one is 255, area 10. Now, we're going to configure a static route to the internet, which our next hop is going to be R1. So we're going to do exits. Well, before I do that, default information, because we're going to want to distribute the static route to our DHCP relay agent and any other possible routers out there that's going to be an adjacent with our OSPF domain, area domain, right? Originate. We'll do exit. Now I can do a static route, IP route to the internet. Next hop is going to be 192.168.2.249. Okay, do show IP routes. Let's see if everything's fine. We got that static route going. Let's go to R1. Actually, let's go to R3. Let's do this first. Second. Enable config T. We're not gonna configure G00 interface because this says DHCP will assign IP address here. Just to show you guys how to do that. G02 is already configured. We're just going to configure G01. Interface G01. IP address 10.0.2.254, 255.255.255.0. No shutdown. Okay. Now we're going to do router OSPF1 network 10.0.2.0 255 area 10 network 192.168.3.0 again area 10 and then network 192.168.2.252/30 area 10. Do show IP interface brief. So we have G00, which is down. Do show, no, I'll just leave it as is for right now. We'll go to R1. Now, even once we configure IP addresses to these interfaces, we still need a static routes from the internet to the, let's say, sorry about that, to the internet, to our LANs, right? If we were to give you guys an example, IP route, say, okay, so basically, let's say we received the packets from the internet that's going to our LAN. If we were to say, 192.168.2.250, basically saying, okay, the destination is going to be any to any, and the next hop is going to be R2. Basically, we're given the opportunity or chance for an attacker to have a much more larger attack surface than they really should. So we're going to minimize that by just specifying the LANs, right? Because we don't want to have them have an attack surface, let's say on a different LAN or our Ubuntu DNS server. So we're just going to specify the LANs. 10.0.2. Now that again won't protect your network alone. Again, you also have additional security implementations like intrusion detection system, prevention systems, even implementing a DMZ to be able to segment your internal network from the external network, right? To be able to add a SIM, network analyzer, be able to analyze the packet at a much more deeper level, flowing across your network. Now again, that's way out of the capabilities of Packet Tracer, but in the future labs I would demonstrate to you guys how to do that through let's say a virtual box or even VMware, right, with other virtual machines. But for now, let's stick to this lab. 10.0.0, and we're gonna do the net mask. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing for LAN B. Okay, so that's it for OSPF and interfaces. Now we're going to configure DHCP, which is the heart of this lab. Cool. So again, to configure DHCP, we're going to first set our DHCP server on R2. So we'll do IP DHCP. Now remember that we have to exclude specific addresses for pool 1, 2, and 3. So we'll do that. Exclude address 10.0.1.1, 10.0.1.10. Do the same thing for .2.10 and .2.1. And then for our pool 3, 192.168.2.253. Okay, now we can configure our pool address, right? So we'll start with IP DHCP pool. We're gonna name it pool. You can name it anything else you want. For example, let's say like LAN A. But for the sake of lab, I'll just put pool 1. Now the network that we're going to specify for this pool is going to be 10.0.1.0, 255.255.255.0. Then we're going to specify the DNS server is going to be 192.168.3.2. Domain name, build, attack, defend.net. And then the default gateway is going to be our G02 interface of R2, 10.0.0.1.254. And I believe that it's it. So we're gonna go do the same thing on pool 2. IP DHCP pool 2, network 10.0.2.0, 255.255.255.0. DNS server 192.168.3.2. Domain name is gonna be build, attack, defend.net. Default router is going to be our G01 interface of R3, 10.0.2.254. And then we're going to do for pool 3 exit IP DHCP pool 3 network 192.168.2.252 255.255.255.252. Okay, so now we're going to configure our 3G00 interface as a DHCP client. That's how we're going to dynamically assign an IP address to that interface. So we'll go to interface G00. Now remember, do show IP interface brief. We see that the interface is where is it? It's down on R3. So do show IP interface brief. You see that it's down. So we're just going to do interface G00, no shutdown. So now that interface is up, but we still don't have an IP address, right? It's up, but it's it's not IP address. So we're going to do IP address, and we're going to basically have this interface as a DHCP client, so we can get an IP address. Now we have an IP address, which is 192.168.2.254. As you can see here, we have it here, but before I even did that command, we didn't have it. So now we do. So now we have a dynamically assigned IP address for that interface. But let's go on our LAN P. Let's do DHCP for all of our end hosts here. So for PC1, we have a default gateway, DNS server, and let's see our IPv4 address, which is great. Same thing for PC2, and same thing for PC3. Now for LAN A, even if we do that, it's not going to work. And why? That's because LAN A is not near the DHCP server. Now, the only way for us to actually get the network configurations for LAN A from the DHCP server is to have R3 as a middleman. In other words, have it work as a DHCP relay agent, where the relay agent will basically serve as a DHCP server for LAN A, when in reality it's not the DHCP server, it's just a middleman for the actual DHCP server on R2. So for example, I can also request manually for an IP address or configurations, IP config, renew. It's not going to work. Why? Again, because R3 is not our DHCP relay agent just yet, so we have to configure that interface G01 because that's the interface that's directly connected to the LAN where we want to assign our IP addresses. So we'll do IP helper address, and it'll be G01 interface of R2, since it's the closest interface of our to R3, 192.168.2.253. Okay, go back. Can we renew an address? And we did. So now it's 10.0.2.1. Let's see all of our configurations. So our domain name is buildattackdefend.net. IPv4 address is here. DHCP server is here, which is great. Sorry, not DHCP server. Default gateway. That's what I meant. Our DHCP server is 192.168.2.253, which is great because the DHCP relay agent is R3. And we're just looking for a DNS server right here, 192.168.3.2. So everything is going good so far. So that's it for our DHCP section, right? So now we're going to move to our DNS part of the lab. We're going to configure all end-host devices to use Ubuntu as their DNS server, which we already did through DHCP. Configure all internet routers to use Ubuntu as its DNS server. We'll show you guys how to do that. Configure the DHCP server to give all internal and host the IP of Ubuntu, which we already did. And then we're gonna ping all PCs by name and also ping Google by name. And we're gonna analyze the messages being sent, right? So before I even get to that point, let's talk about DHCP messages. I didn't really go too much about that at all on my blog post, but I do want to talk about it here, right? Because it's pretty important. I think I'll add it in my blog post. But so there's a process with how DHCP works. For example, let's have LAN A, right? LAN A is requesting for IP addresses for the entire of its network. So for example, PC4, PC5, and PC6. What's going to happen is there's going to be a DHCP discover message sent across the network to the DHCP server from the clients, saying, hey, I'm trying to find any available DHCP server across the network so that we can have IP address allocated for this pool of LAN. The DHCP offer is going to be sent from the DHCP server and basically say, hey, I have an offer of network configurations that I can send to you. And then DHCP is going to be a DHCP request message from LAN A saying, okay, I'll accept that offer that you're offering me. And then the DHCP acknowledgement is going to come from the DHCP server saying, okay, here are the network configurations that you requested. And there's going to be a lease for when there's going to be a specific time period when these IP addresses are assigned to you, like a lease duration. Typically, that's going to be assigned by a network admin or engineer. Yeah, and that's how DHCP messages work. So with DNS, let's go with DNS on Ubuntu. Let's set our DNS server to itself, 192.168.3.2. Go to services, DNS is on. We're gonna have google.com as 203.0.11.2 add. Now we're going to do one PC per LAN just to save time. So do PC4. PC4 is 2.11. Add, and then we'll do PC1. PC1 is 1.11. PC1. Okay. So that's it. Let's actually configure these network devices to have a DNS server of Ubuntu. IP name server 192.168.3.2. Same thing for R2. IP name server 192.168.3.2. Now, can we ping let's say PC1. Can we ping PC4? Sorry. Yes, we can. Can we ping PC1? Yes, we can. Now, I won't be able to ping PC5 or any other PCs. That's because those PCs are not resolved through our DNS, right? So we don't have the domain PC5 pointing to 10.0.2.12 or 13, which we could, but we don't have that. Now, can we ping Google? Yes, we can. So we could ping Google. So let's actually analyze those messages being sent across our network. So let's start with PC4, or PC1, sorry. So our PC6, which is the client device we're requesting to ping PC1, it'll go straight to R3, which is our default gateway. From there, it's going to go to the Ubuntu DNS server because PC6 does not know what the domain name oh sorry, the IP address is of that domain PC1. So then Ubuntu is going to go back to R3 and send it back to PC6. PC6 is going to say, okay, I got the IP address from DNS, and the packet's going back to R3, which is going back to R2, back to switch 1, and then PC1, right? PC1 saying, hey, I got your message. I'm just letting you know that you connected to me, basically establishing a TCP three-way handshake connection with PC1 through PC6. And that's how that works. Now let's actually reset this simulation and do it with Google. We're gonna ping Google, see, it's gonna work a little different. So again, it's going to R3, and then our DNS server is gonna resolve google.com to 203.0.11.2. PC6 know that IP address. PC6 is now going to go to the path of that destined address through the path that's been learned via OSPF on OSPF area 10. And then our ASBR is going to send that static route to the internet. I already sent it to Google. Google is saying, okay, hey, I got your message. We're going to send it back to the client device. Now our client has established a connection with google.com. And that's it for this lab. I hope you guys learned something valuable today. We understood how to configure OSPF interfaces, which you guys should already learn based on my previous labs, but the main focus was DHCP and DNS. We show you guys how to configure DHCP server on R2 by excluding specific ranges of hosts, configuring DNS, domain, and default gateway for our DHCP configurations, and then from there be able to configure another network device to have an interface work as a DHCP client, so that our DHCP server is able to dynamically assign an IP address to that interface or that network device. From there, we also configured a DHCP relay agent for LAN A to be able to have those network configurations given to them from the DHCP server on R2. And then after that, we then did a quick overview of DNS. This one was through Packet Tracer. I do have a lab on how to manually find the IP address of a domain name or website through a command utility named dig on Linux. You guys should check that out. But on Packet Tracer, I was able to showcase that as well. Yep. And I hope you guys learned something valuable today. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.